Everybody got the cameras set up? Thank you. Uhuru. My name is Chimaringa Waller. I'm the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. I want to welcome everybody that came from the community and also welcome the press and appreciate the press coming out today. This press conference is about the situation in Baltimore immediately, but also it's a statement about what is happening all over this country and what has been happening, particularly since the rebellions in Ferguson after the murder of Mike Brown. So we want to make a statement here today to give our position on that from this area and let the press know what it is that we're going to be doing going forward in terms of Baltimore. We do have a press statement that we're passing out to the media, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be making a statement on behalf of the African People's Socialist Party, which is the founding organization of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. So again, I want to express appreciation for everybody coming out, and I want to call up Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru. For the benefit of those who do not know, Uhuru is Swahili for freedom. Swahili, of course, is an African language. And again, I just want to express appreciation for the media that did show up. Obviously, the situation in Baltimore, Maryland has caused a great deal of attention by people all around the country, and in fact by people throughout this world. And as usual, there's much consternation being displayed by media pundits and elected officials about what is happening. We see that even since the uprisings in Ferguson that came about as a consequence of the police murder on August 9th of Mike Brown, that even the President of the United States has weighed in on this question of police violence, or as he would put it, police community relations. The then Attorney General Eric Holder has also initiated a process of setting up these regional Kumbaya sessions where the police and selected forces from the community, none of whom were involved in the resistance, would come together and tell each other love stories. Loretta Lynch, who is replacing Holder, has made it clear through her process of becoming Attorney General that she is about making the police feel comfortable and feel good and recharging the morale of the police department. In this city, we have seen a new Negro chief of police who has been paraded before the community here and before much of the United States as representing a so-called new kind of policing who engages in, has a police department that we've heard, engages in stopping and walking and talking. And most recently, over the last day or two, initiated a conference that would deal with what they call community policing, which is another term that they use for creating a community of snitches, people who would inform on the police and winning the participation of the community to inform on itself. All of these attempts that are designed to distract people and to take the questions away from the real contradictions that we're confronted with. In every instance, we hear that perhaps it was a bad apple, a bad cop who did something, and that it does not reflect the policies of the particular police entity. More and more, we're hearing that it's not the police as such, but perhaps it's bad training, lack of sensitivity, the need for new black cops, more black cops, things of this session. In fact, in Ferguson, the police murder has been blamed on the African community itself, saying that you're responsible because you don't assume the responsibility to become cops yourselves, or because you didn't vote to put Negroes in office so that this thing would be less likely to occur. All of this is nonsense. You cannot explain the fact that throughout this country there is a growing resistance that's emerging because of police murder, that they kill 12-year-old children in playgrounds with play guns in Cleveland, that they shoot 7-year-old children in their beds in Detroit, that people are choked to death in plain view on videos that go viral and seen by everybody throughout this country and around the world. Doesn't explain an 18-year-old young man walking down the street in his own community who would confront an arrogant thug who would gun him down, shoot him several times with his hands up after having been chased by this cop. It doesn't explain how someone can be running from the police in North Carolina and get shot 8 times in the back, and then after being shot, there's a cop that's videoed dropping some kind of evidence onto the body that is designed to show how the cop was justified in killing. And in fact, in every instance almost, we have a cop who's afraid for his life. I was afraid for my life, therefore I murdered the black person. Couldn't see his hands, or his hands went to his waist, and therefore I killed him. The narrative is the same throughout the country, and with such a similar narrative, with such an ubiquitous occurring of black people being gunned down, it becomes clear that the narrative is the same because that the policy is the same. And that the fact is that the police function in this country as an occupying military force that has the responsibility of keeping subdued a colonized population, that African people in this country exists as colonial subjects and not citizens as people would have us believe. I think that increasingly what will become clear is that Ferguson and Baltimore represent a new norm in this country. It is the first time that we've seen such a situation since the 1960s, where the resistance was everywhere. And it was a resistance that only stopped, and that many people have been allowed to forget because the government did succeed in murdering Malcolm X and murdering Martin Luther King and killing several members of the Black Panther Party, crushing that and other organizations that stood for freedom and self-determination. And subsequent to that, of course, they've only had to deal with persons who were propped up by the government and by the U.S. ruling class media, people like Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and who could not even be successful if it had not been for the murder of King and Malcolm, and people like Obama and Holder, and all of these forces. And so now it's really interesting because we've got black faces clearly that stand, represent the U.S. government as it makes this attack on African people. I'm told that even as we have in this discussion, that Barack Hussein Obama is involved in some kind of press conference that while acknowledging the poverty and joblessness and things like that that plague our communities, the economic quarantine that African people suffer from, concludes that police containment is the only viable response that the government has for the black community. So we are here to say clearly, 1, that we stand in solidarity with the resistance of our people in Baltimore. 2, that there should be an immediate withdrawal of all of the police and military forces in the community of Baltimore. 3, that everyone that they've arrested over the last several days should be free, immediately turned loose. 4, reparations should be paid to the family of Freddie Gray, who was murdered in such a brutal and grotesque fashion. 5, that there should be black community control of the police in Baltimore and throughout this country, that the African community has a responsibility and a right, a democratic right, to control the people in our communities with guns, with the sanction to kill at will. That all of this should represent a struggle by our community for self-determination, that we are increasingly coming to understand that we cannot trust the lives of our children and our families in the hands of the United States government. And I think that part of what we are saying also is that for a long period of time, for more than 2 generations, the true voice of the black community has been stilled by assassinations, arrest, murder, you name it. And increasingly, those tools of the white power, such as Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackal, those tools, they don't work. And the fact that Baltimore occurred shows that Al Sharpton, it doesn't work. That Jesse Jackson, it doesn't work. That having a Negro front for U.S. imperialism in the form of Barack Hussein Obama doesn't work. People want freedom. People want freedom, and it doesn't matter the complexion of the person that presides over the execution of our children. We're opposed to it. And we stand in solidarity with that. And we want to offer all the support that we can to our people in Baltimore and throughout this country. And we recognize that St. Petersburg, Florida is Baltimore. That there's no difference in what happened in Baltimore than what happens in this community historically, and that putting a Negro chief in front of the brutality is not going to be a viable solution here anymore than it is any other place in this country. So essentially that's what we want to say. We also want to say that the Uhuru movement is part of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, and that just on the 18th and 19th of this month, we presided over a national conference in Ferguson, St. Louis, Missouri, where African people came from throughout the United States, and with a conference that voted that the position of the African community henceforth around these questions of police murder and police brutality would be black community control of the police. That's the only viable and democratic response that we can have. That we will be approaching the city of St. Petersburg. We will go before the city council with a resolution offered to the city council for them to pass that would establish an election, a special election in the city of St. Petersburg, where a black community control of council commission will be created using a quite open, transparent process of full and complete ability for everybody in the black community to vote to put forth a black community control of police commission that would be under the authority and leadership of the black community here, which means that the black community would have the power of hiring, firing, training, the control of the budget, having to do with policing in this community, and determining what the role of the police would be in this city. So this is something that's being carried throughout, pushed throughout the United States, and you will see this in Baltimore as well. And so we wanted to offer up this discussion and the position of the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party. Because we know that people are being talked to all around this country who will make statements that the ruling class wants to hear. And what we are saying is that the voice of the people will no longer be stilled, and people are being quite articulate even at this moment in Baltimore. And we stand with those people who are making those statements. So Uhuru, and thank you so much for coming out.
We're going to take some questions and from the media. So if you can just say what media you're from and then ask your question.
Sure. I'm Mark Rivera with 10 News. When you guys see the looting and the violence that's going on in the streets of Baltimore, I mean, what goes through your mind? Are you behind them as well?
I'm glad you asked that question because we're tremendously concerned with violence and looting. And the problem that we have is that our community has been looted since we've been here. It's looted every day. Wait a minute. We live in an impoverished community, and everybody out in the streets in Baltimore doing what you call looting is aware that our community is a victim of ongoing looting. It's done by people who wear pinstripe suits and ties and things like that, and who live in air-conditioned sites and tree-lined communities and things like that. This community has suffered economic quarantine Black people in this city, for example, came and built the economy of this city. Literally built the economy of this city. And the same thing is true throughout this country. So I'm concerned about looting, but I just happen to know who the real looters are and who the victims of looting is. One, and when you talk about violence, and the violence that you're talking about is a building burn or something like that, when we see that black people are responding to a history of violence that's committed against us on a regular basis. We're talking about Freddie Gray, who is dead. There is no violence greater than that, unless you want to count the forced poverty that black people in Baltimore have to live with and have to come up with the most incredible schemes just to try to survive, to feed their children and things like that. And most often these schemes might be considered illegal because the legal system doesn't offer African people an opportunity to have a living, to take care of our children, to have the kinds of schools we want, the medical care that we need. None of that exists within the existing legal system that came into existence through slavery. So I share the concern that anybody has about violence and looting. We're tired of experiencing being victims of the violence and looting of a social system that came into existence. We're on America. Remember, this is the land that we're in, where there are concentration camps in this country right now called Indian reservations because of violence and looting. It's not like the indigenous people said, come on over, we know you're hungry and cold and starving and come take our land, come loot us, etc. So we're not going to pretend that we don't know where we are. We know where we are, we know the history of this relationship, we know where the looting comes from in the real world. And we know that we got banksters now who Obama shovels trillions of dollars to on a regular basis, even as the black community is starving. We know who the looters are. Yes. And it ain't no poor black people in Baltimore. Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions from the media?
I'm surprised. Yeah. I really am, because I know that this is not the narrative you're accustomed to. Yes. You're accustomed to a cringing, head-bowed, shuffling Negro preacher who we hear is speaking for the entire community. I'm told, and I've gone to journalism school, actually used to work for the St. Petersburg Times. And the real story is not that the dog bit the man, which is Al Sharpton coming to town, but the man bit the dog, which is Omali Yeshitela telling you an entirely different kind of narrative. And this is not the narrative. You're not going to get this from Holloway. You're not going to get this from Holloway, who came here for the exact purpose of disguising, obscuring, camouflaging the role of a hostile entity in keeping the black community oppressed. You're not going to get that from them, nor from any of the cringing Negro preachers and so-called leaders who will not speak to the interests of an impoverished, terrorized African community who live with this every day. I read an article just the other day in the St. Petersburg Times, that's now the Tampa Bay Times, about the numbers of black people who are stopped on bicycles in Tampa. I don't believe that article is true. I don't believe that Tampa has the most Africans who are stopped daily on bicycles. I believe that's St. Petersburg. I'm not saying they don't do it a lot in Tampa, but there's no place that I travel that this does not happen to black people. What I would say about violence and looting, that anybody who is aware of the relationship that black people have in this country should be celebrating the fact that this country has not been torched to the ground by black people who have been historically oppressed in this country and are oppressed every day. And people in the media, if you don't know that this is happening, then you should resign. You should quit. It is absolutely irresponsible that you will not report. And I'm told that I'm supposed to make a distinction between the corporations that own the media and the so-called honest reporters who are carrying out this kind of work. Well, the honest reporters have a responsibility to report honestly. Otherwise, you can't make a distinction between you and the corporates that own the media that's got the same interest in maintaining the status quo as General Motors or any other corporations in this country. So I do thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it that you did show, and I know that I'm in the company of honest reporters, all honorable men. All honorable men, all. I appreciate so very much that you did come out. And if there's nothing else, I do thank you. Thank you. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.